Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, January 13th, 2026. Time to get going all over again. And, well, everything is just about as dumb as it was when we left it yesterday. But, of course, there's been new developments in dumb. It's Tuesday the 13th, which is not a thing. Friday the 13th is the one we consider to be unlucky. Tuesday the 13th is, I guess, just dumb. And it looks to be getting dumber. So we're on our way. All right, let's see. All thumbs up on the signal, so that's all good news. Hey, interesting times to certainly that we live in, but I don't know how many of you are pestered this way. I am pestered each day. I'm not certain how this happened, and this is one of those things that shows up in my inbox all the time that I think I actually have control over and could dismiss and unsubscribe from. There's about 10 things in there that apparently it's impossible to unsubscribe from. I've tried, it doesn't work. And one of them is the Denver Post. So wake up, Denver. And the other one is this batch of stuff that I think I've never really convinced myself to unsubscribe from them. They're just interesting enough that I don't mind deleting them each day if they don't look particularly interesting. History facts and, word stuff, the word of the day kind of thing. I don't actually read the word. Word Genius is the one. I don't know how I got on that one. Probably from looking stuff up all the time, which is like, well, you're not a word genius. That's why you need this. But anyway, so sometimes an interesting one will come up, a history fact. I get a couple of them, and some of them I really should get rid of. Anyway, it's an interesting time to be subscribed to these things. They could probably chime in on current events at the moment. We're in a situation where I don't know what to say. Our foreign policy, our military policy is so weird and dumb and backwards. And I guess with all our reading about neo-royalism, maybe this works. Sort of a throwback type of international system of international organization, if I guess you could call it that. A world order, not yet, thankfully, but I know they're working on it. But neo-royalism, I guess it would make sense that you would bring back these other weird, archaic forms. I think I mentioned at some point, and if not, I'll do it now. Senator Mike Lee of Utah, at some point in the development, I don't know, is there a development even of the murder policy that we have going on down in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, where we blow up boats because they're smaller than us and the people in them are from other countries, and we don't like that. And maybe they have drugs, but we've got plenty of drugs here, by the way. Thank you. By the way, we've got enough. We're good. And if you wanted to take a break so that you didn't get blown up, that's actually what they want you to do, and I don't want you to feel like you don't want to do that just to defy them. Take a break, take a vacation, or I don't know what to tell you. But at any rate, these boats that we've been blowing up, it inspired, well, a lot of things, but in one of the things it inspired was Mike Lee to decide somehow, I don't really know what even motivated the need for this. I was only kidding when I, years ago, brought up the concept of privateers of the Caribbean, and we had a totally different idea in mind, by the way. Oh, and it wasn't serious, and I don't have the ability to raise mercenary armies. Okay, but aside from that, Mike Lee put in a bill essentially to authorize, I guess, the president, I don't know who else he would be authorizing for this, to issue letters of marque and reprisal, which is really something we haven't really discussed or used in many, many, many years, I guess a couple of centuries now. There was during colonial times and then immediately thereafter in the founding of the Constitution era, it was still a thing. And we've kind of moved past that, sort of professionalized our Navy. No real need for the past, let's say, 200 plus years for privateering type Navy. But he thought it would be interesting to bring back letters of marque and reprisal, which I don't, again, I'm not even certain why he thought that was a good idea. And I don't think it represents a cost savings. I don't really know how much mercenary naval power we actually have. Or maybe he just thought it would be fun and interesting for those Proud Boys, 3%ers, Oath Keepers, etc., who haven't already signed up to work for ICE or Border Patrol or various other of the federal agencies that are terrorizing people one city at a time and probably peeing all over the floors in their Target bathrooms, by the way. Greg Bovino made an appearance in a Target the other day, and my guess is that he was, like most people, not all that good at actually hitting the target, and they had to mop up after him. But it was an interesting interlude. We'll get back to that perhaps later, though that should not be news. Anyway, I don't know what they thought the letters of marque and reprisal. I think it was really just Mike Lee trying to look like he was a history buff or intellectual or something. I don't think the bill has any future, because I don't think there's any other Republican that even thinks there's a need for it. But as it turns out, it's part of a trend to bring back weird, esoteric, archaic, and anachronistic forms of, I don't know what, organizing for combat, I guess. And the new one, the latest one, also has to do with our activity in the Caribbean, which I guess that too brings us back to the pirate era. But leave it to the neo-royalists who brought back letters of marque and reprisal to bring us back to a practice of perfidy. I bet you didn't, well, probably by now you've heard the story or seen it online or read the New York Times piece, so you kind of knew it was coming. Everybody was walking around yesterday evening saying, word of the day, perfidy. What is perfidy and why are we talking about it? We'll let the New York Times tell you, or we'll let me tell you what the New York Times had to say about it. The article, doubtless, by now, if you're East Coast and awake and listening live, you may have seen this already. If you are listening on the podcast, you are, or West Coast or both, then I don't know. Well, I guess it probably would have broken mid-afternoon for you. So maybe you heard it before us. Who knows? We might have been eating dinner. Here's the piece the New York Times has, illustrated with a giant photo of weekend Fox News television host turned defense secretary, that's correct, Pete Hagueseth, who, by the way, and along with this story, somebody coined the nickname for him, Pete Hagueseth. I thought that was good. It's a little easier to say than my Hagueseth. It's just difficult to get that out over and over again. But Hagueseth, very interesting. And I noticed when it was circulated by somebody I remember who was, it was a Brendan Nyan actually circulating, or somebody else's coinage, and he made note, this belongs to so-and-so, all rights reserved. And I had to note for the record, Pete Hagueseth, famously noted for his respect for the reservation of rights. So you're going to be fine on that one. That might not work out for you. But, all right, here's the story. U.S. attacked boat with aircraft, we know about that looked like a civilian plane. Oh, that does seem weird. I'm not certain why you would do it. Well, the answer brings us around to the word of the day. Even accepting the Trump administration's claim, the subheader says, that there is an armed conflict with suspected drug runners, which they're saying we don't, the laws of war bar perfidy. Well, that's just fine and dandy if you know what perfidy is. But they'll tell you. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people on the byline, which I'm coming to understand through other people's news analysis that's like a siren in itself. It's another indication that there's something fairly serious going on here, and that the paper may be either breaking some really serious news or going out on a limb perhaps a little bit and just really looking to have more reporters talking to more sources so that there can be more verification before you run the story. So here we go. It is Charlie Savage, Eric Schmidt, John Ismay, Julian E. Barnes. I prefer to just say Julian Barnes. I'm sure he does when he introduces himself, but it's there. He puts the E there for a reason, I guess. Riley Mellon and Christian Trebert. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's right. Okay. Here's the deal. the Pentagon used a secret aircraft, painted to look like a civilian plane, in its first attack on a boat that the Trump administration said was smuggling drugs, killing 11 people last September, according to officials briefed on the matter. The aircraft also carried its munitions inside the fuselage rather than visibly under its wings. They said that would be, of course, part of the disguise. I'd really like to see a picture of this plane. I don't think there is one in here, and I guess if it's secret, then you don't. And of course, if it's prima facie evidence of perfidy, I suppose they're hiding it somewhere. But it might be interesting to note that may have had something to do with how the boat reacted. I mean, a civilian plane, the first attack, they may not even have noticed that there was a plane above them, beyond, okay, I think I hear a noise. Then an attack, and then it may be that when those two survivors scrambled up on the wreckage of the boat and then saw this plane circling back to them, they may in fact have been hoping to be rescued by this plane. But instead, the plane thought, oh, well, they're clearly continuing the mission, continuing the attack. Against what? Against a civilian plane? That actually is a lot worse, I think, for them in the world court there. But okay. The non-military appearance is significant, according to legal specialists, because the administration has argued that its lethal boat attacks are lawful, not murders. Because President Trump, quote, determined, about those presidential determinations and how loose and fast and loose they can be. President Trump determined the United States is in an armed conflict with drug cartels, but the laws of armed conflict prohibit combatants from feigning civilian status to fool adversaries into dropping their guard or hoping to be rescued by them, then attacking and killing them. That is a war crime, and it's called perfidy. And here we are. So now you know about that. You're determined we're in an armed conflict, and even if you were right about that, which you're not, you can't do this. You can't disguise yourself as a civilian and then spring an attack on people without being guilty of a war crime. Of course, I suppose it's possible that the geniuses at the Pentagon and in the White House counsel's office say, well, if we're not really at war, which we're not, then it can't be a war crime. But then, of course, it doesn't help you to be out there saying, well, we are at war. It's our belief that we're at war, and here's how we conduct ourselves by committing war crimes. I don't know if that's going to help you if the rest of the world really thinks you're not at war. And as others have pointed out, it's all very interesting. But since you're not actually at war, we're still back at square one. It's murder. Are you also disguising yourself for the purposes of committing this murder? Terrific. It's murder. Or if you really want to get fun with it, you could say it's a little bit of both. It's murfidy. It sounds a lot, make you sound like you were killed by Muppets or something. But murfidy, it's not a real concept. But neither is this war. So, retired Major General Stephen J. Lepper, L-E-P-P-E-R. I don't know if maybe he says it differently. I don't know. A former Deputy Judge Advocate General for the United States Air Force said that if the aircraft had been painted in a way that disguised its military nature and got close enough for the people on the boat to see it, so you can intend to commit perfidy, but get away with it if the other guys don't figure out that, that's just that actually is military. You can't fool me with your perfidious disguise. I know exactly who you are. Aha! Not guilty of perfidy then. You admit it. Well, you admitted it before you died. Anyway. Okay. So if the aircraft had been painted in a way that disguised its military nature and got close enough for the people on the boat to see it, tricking them into failing to realize that they should take evasive action or surrender to survive, I don't think that was even possible. That was a war crime under armed conflict standards. It comes down to this. I mean, we'll read the rest of the details because it's interesting and weird and crimey. But essentially what we're saying here is there's really no scenario under which, no matter how you slice it, this attack on that first boat was permissible under the laws of war or international law. Shielding your identity is an element of perfidy, our Judge Advocate General says. If the aircraft flying above is not identifiable as a combatant aircraft, it should not be engaged in combatant activity. The aircraft swooped in low enough for the people aboard the boat to see it, according to officials who have seen or been briefed on surveillance video from the attack. The boat had turned back toward Venezuela, apparently after seeing the plane before the first strike, which is all interesting all by itself. If it was civilian in appearance, you might wonder, it might argue for the defense, if there ever was one, the defense of the Defense Department, of course, that, okay, well, the reason they turned back even upon spotting an apparently civilian plane is that they thought they might have been spotted by civilian patrols out looking for drug-carrying boats, and they turned back because they were a drug-carrying boat. I need to clean up my language a little bit here. That would be the defense that was offered. And then, of course, the missiles sort of changed everything after that. 2 survivors of the initial attack later appeared to wave at the aircraft after clambering aboard an overturned piece of the hull. I wasn't sure whether I remembered correctly that they waved at the aircraft. Now that that's back in there, they obviously thought, they don't know what blew them up, but then they saw a plane. Hooray, we're saved. Help us, plane. And as it turns out, it was a perfidious attacker. Darn. If only they had known about perfidy and the dangers involved. The 2 survivors of the attack later appeared to wave at the aircraft after clambering overboard an overturned piece of the hull before the military killed them in a follow-up strike that also sank the wreckage. It is not clear whether the initial survivors knew that the explosion on their vessel had been caused by a missile attack. We could have asked them, but, well, not now. They may be okay. Well, maybe not now. It's one of my favorites from Groundhog Day. But, gallows humor at best. The military has since switched to, isn't that nice of them, using recognizably military aircraft for boat strikes. And by the way, probably cheaper. We already have them. You know, I mean, I don't know how much a Halloween costume for a fighter jet costs, but considering the toilet seats are supposedly $600 or $10,000, or I don't know, and I don't know what they're going for anymore. The hammers maybe were $600 back in the day when we believed such things. I imagine the Halloween costume, although, you know, these days, well, maybe at a Spirit Halloween you could get it for less, but the supply is unreliable. What are we going to do? Is that an airplane or is that a guy in a clown wig? I can't see what's flying towards us, but on the off chance that, you know how clowns are. First of all, they can be pretty murdery all by themselves. What if this is a flying perfidious clown? You know, it sounds like you're talking about weather. Anyway, the military has since switched to using recognizably military aircraft, you know, the ones we bought and paid for these boat strikes, including MQ-9 Reaper drones, but also according to them, if you ask them, they would say that. Although it is not clear whether those aircraft got low enough to be seen. In a boat attack in October, 2 survivors of an initial strike swam away. Oh, I didn't realize. This is another one? In an October attack, 2 survivors swam away from the wreckage and so avoided being killed by a follow-up strike on the remnants of their vessel. The military rescued them and returned them to their home countries, Colombia and Ecuador, and Spirit Halloween as well. And it was October, so maybe that was the excuse. It's the reason we're in this. Well, it was September the first time. So no, I guess not. U.S. military manuals about the law of war discuss perfidy at length, saying it includes when a combatant feigns civilian status, so the adversary, quote, neglects to take precautions which are otherwise necessary, unquote. A U.S. Navy handbook says lawful combatants at sea use offensive force, quote, within the bounds of military honor, particularly without resort to perfidy, and stress that commanders have a duty to, quote, distinguish their own forces from the civilian population. So, I think everybody kind of gets what perfidy is now, but I think some good examples of perfidy, especially if you, does it apply to pirates? I mean, if you ever saw a pirate movie where the ship that's chasing down whatever the vessel they're attacking is flying some other flag, or no flag, and only at the last minute when it's too late do they raise the Jolly Roger. I don't know. Is Is that the music you would use for Jolly Roger? I mean, you could boo-hoo. Oh, it's not a fun party boat. It's a pirate boat. Anyway, that sort of thing. Also, historical example that was conveyed, the Trojan horse. Hey, this isn't a military method of infiltrating the city. It's a gift from, I don't know, a giant race of babies who left their toys here. I don't know what that was supposed to be exactly, but the idea was this is a peace offering, but it was filled with soldiers. That's perfidy. All right. Well, there you go. A couple of also painting your plane to look like something else, I guess, would be perfidy, it turns out. So, yeah, the manual is against it. Questions about perfidy have arisen in closed-door briefings of Congress by military leaders, according to people familiar with the matter, but have not been publicly discussed because the aircraft is classified. So they've been telling members of Congress, we have airplanes that look like other kinds of airplanes. Really? Isn't that perfidy? And at which point they say, I don't know, but good job on your SATs. The military would know. And probably the answer was, well, not technically, because reasons. If we kill somebody with it, it's perfidy. Just flying around in costume is just fun. It's just a masquerade. It's all fun and games until you kill someone, at which point it becomes perfidy. I don't know what the answer was. All right. The public debate has focused on a follow-up strike that killed the two initial survivors despite a war law prohibition on targeting the shipwrecked. So it's every law in the books is getting broken with this one. We all focused on that one. And I suppose and there were people who criticized that, hey, the first strike, let alone the follow-up strike, was already a murder, a violation of the laws of war. There's no war going on here. These aren't combatants. The second strike is against the law about targeting the shipwrecked, but it's also about the perfidy. I guess both of the strikes. So I guess if you're a fan of the theory that even the first strike was a violation of the laws of war, you're doubly right. But now you have a new word to use. The press office for the U.S. Special Operations Command, whose leader, Admiral Frank M. Bradley, ran the operation on September 2nd, declined to comment on the nature of the aircraft used in the attack. Oh, too bad. But the Pentagon insisted in a statement that its arsenal has undergone legal review for compliance with the laws of armed conflict. It's undergone it. It's failed it, but it has undergone it. The U.S. military utilizes a wide array of standard and non-standard aircraft depending on mission requirements. Kingsley Wilson, the Pentagon press secretary, said in response to questions from the New York Times. Prior to the fielding and employment of each aircraft, they go through a rigorous procurement process to ensure compliance with domestic law, department policies and regulations, and applicable international standards, including the law of armed conflict. I wonder if it's a wrap that they put on these things, like on a Cybertruck. They wrapped it to look like the Goodyear blimp. I don't know what they would. I'd be very interested in seeing it, but of course it's classified. So I'd have to go to PERFIIIIDY in order to see pictures of it. A White House spokeswoman, Anna Kelly, issued a statement that did not specifically engage with the perfidy issues, which is what everybody wanted to know about, but defended the strike as having been directed by Mr. Trump to go after, quote, narcotics, trafficking, and violent cartel activities, but to pretend you're somebody else while you're doing it. She added, the strike was fully consistent with the law of armed conflict. And that's supposed to mean they were within the bounds of the law of armed conflict. It was fully consistent with it. This is a classical violation of it. Fully consistent with the examples that they give you of what not to do. But, I think that I don't know. I'm not certain whether they really think sometimes that they were within the bounds of law or whether this is just one of those fun, tricky answers. Although why anybody at this point gives fun, tricky answers, I don't know. Just lie. And they may be doing that here. It is not clear what the aircraft was. While multiple officials confirmed that it was not painted in a classic military style, they declined to specify exactly what it looked like. I was wondering about that. Like if it's a classic fighter jet like you see from Top Gun or something like that, and they're like, well, we'll paint it to look like a civilian aircraft. I mean, I don't know if you can disguise it with paint or a wrap or whatever to look like a Piper Cub. Well, geez, that's a weird shaped one. It's moving an awful lot faster than usual. Well, or like it's an A-10, and everybody's like, that doesn't look like, whatever. Alaska Air. And what are they doing back down here anyway? I mean, you can't make it look like, I don't know. So my guess is that it may be more of a civilian styled aircraft and also is not painted with, U.S. Coast Guard, United States Air Force. There are such, I mean, they have other than combat vehicles in the U.S. Air Force and the Navy. So it might be something like that they, also outfitted with internal storage for their weaponry. Anyway, it's not clear what the aircraft was. They declined to say exactly what it looked like. Again, you'd have to go to PERFIIIIDY and eat dinner on the patio or go into the office or the bathroom, I guess, to get a good look at it. Amateur plane spotting enthusiasts, wow, posted pictures on Reddit in early September. Oh, this is amazing. Of what appeared to be one of the military's modified 737s, painted white with a blue stripe and with no military markings, at the St. Croix Airport in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Just a short hop from Epstein Island, by the way. Release the Epstein files, everybody. That's right. St. Croix, the second of the larger of the U.S. Virgin Islands. It's St. Thomas that the little St. James lies off of, but whatever. I just wanted to mention that they've only released about 1% of the Epstein files and so are in violation of federal law there. But if they painted it to look like an airplane, I guess it would all be okay. I don't know. Anyway, that helps clear things up. A 737, of course, can be militarized as a carrier plane or a radar or command station. And if you paint it U.S. Air Force, everybody goes, oh no. If you paint it with nothing to look like an airliner, then I guess, no one will notice. Perfidy. Very interesting. And now I can take a look during the break at the pictures on Reddit. Hooray. I don't even have to go to Mar-a-Lago. Hi, everybody. It's me, David, still your host for the Kagro in the Morning Show after all these years. Thank you for all your continuing support for the show. And if you're listening regularly and still thinking about getting on board as a supporter, well, the time is now. Patreon.com is the easiest way to make recurring subscription-style payments every month, all year round, to keep us going. patreon.com/KagroX brings you to our page where you can sign up with your monthly support. And hey, have you seen our clever new subscription tiers? It's easier than ever to sign up for, say, one crisp dollar bill for every information-packed 2-hour show. If you're the plan ahead type, there's even a year-long subscription program that saves you 15% on the cover price. Or it would if there was a cover price, or even a cover, for that matter. patreon.com/KAGROX. Thanks again for all your support. Oh, all right, everybody. Hey, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. So I got a look at the plane, as I was saying, probably got muffled and played over by the break music. I didn't have to go to PERFIIIIDY to get a close-up look at it. Now I don't have to break into the bathrooms there. And I don't know what is the initiation fee still only $200K there? You'd think the price would have gone up by now. So I went to Reddit to take a look at these things, and well, it looks like it's very clear what can make it look like a civilian aircraft. An airliner, a 737, could certainly, would look like a civilian aircraft unless you painted something on it to indicate otherwise. And there's nothing on this plane to indicate otherwise. And I mean nothing. There's a blue stripe, just makes it look like a typical airliner, although an aging airliner to be sure. But they could certainly be, bopping around in the Caribbean with that. But what makes this interesting is that this was posted 7 months ago, again, by the plane spotters, which is an amazing hobby. I don't participate in it, but it's just amazing that it goes on and that people are so dedicated to it. But it's one of those things that I guess they love to spot planes that are interesting and different, but they track planes, even the ones that aren't interesting and different, the same way any civilian authority tracks planes with those tail numbers, like a license plate for a plane. Everybody's supposed to have a tail number. And what made this one so interesting to everybody was 7 months ago, someone posts a picture of this thing saying 737 with no tail number or markings, which raises eyebrows certainly among this crowd. and now should raise eyebrows everywhere. And let's see, this says, this landed on Sunday at KABQ/Kirkland AFB, Air Force Base. Where is that? During a commercial aviation break in the air show. So there's an air, so right in front of everybody. That's pretty dumb. There was an air show going on, and then they said take a break, and I guess they thought everybody will go to the bathrooms and take their eyes off the skies and go to the concession stands, and we'll let commercial air traffic land here, which, we have regularly scheduled reasons for having that. So whatever, and everyone will look away. Oh, look, who cares? A 737. But right in front, an air show, right in front of an aviation enthusiasts, you're going to land something with no tail markings. It seems kind of dumb. You would have thought they would have put something on it just for that. Why not do this in the middle of the night? I don't know. It's very odd. Is KABQ, is that Albuquerque? Maybe ABQ makes me think it's Albuquerque, but let's see. Yeah, okay. So Kirtland. It's not Kirkland. I read it as Kirkland. It makes it sound like it's a something I got at Costco. But Kirtland, Kirtland. Yes, Air Force Base in the southeast quadrant of the Albuquerque, New Mexico, something, because I'm not going to read the rest of the thing or the Google entry. All right, so interesting. That's what got them interested. And then they took a couple other pictures. So then that was 7 months ago. And then 4 months ago, somebody took a picture of the same plane and said this plane is in St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands currently. And I'll just say weird, mysterious, private looking, even if a little dumpy looking, it's a little rundown looking, jets flitting around in the Virgin Islands is a big reminder that they've only released 1% of the Epstein files, at least in my view. All right. So then the latest post there, I think, from yesterday, heads up, this post was linked to in this very well-written article from the New York Times when we were reading. So very interesting. But now, of course, it's they're all critiquing it. It's not well-written because they use this term and not that term. Interestingly, somebody adds, this aircraft can't be the one that conducted the strike because it doesn't have an internal weapons bay. But I suppose if you modify it to 737 to look like it didn't have an internal weapons bay, and you had an unlimited budget, which we've got, I think you could probably make it work. It might not be a great comment, but I don't know what it would cost to give an internal weapons bay to a 737. Also, I don't know. It just seems like, well, no one can really figure out why they would even need to do such a thing, which is what makes it part of what makes it so dumb and crimey. Very Trumpy. Anyway, regardless of the specific aircraft at issue, 3 people familiar with the matter acknowledged that it was not painted in the usual military gray and lacked military markings and a tail number, but they said its transponder was transmitting a military tail number, meaning broadcasting or squawking, as they call it, its military identity via radio signals. So interesting. So everybody who spotted it at the air show didn't have their transponder, whatever the hell it is, on. I don't know if people carry, mobile ones around, or maybe there's a phone app, for all I know, that will do. I thought you would think that plane spotters would want to do that, and or be, maybe they just look up the tail numbers on their phones when they spot them. But you would think it would be of some interest. But okay, well, they went ahead and did that. But that's also, by the way, just proof that there wasn't any particularly sophisticated electronic equipment in hand for the people on the boat, either before or after the initial attack. Several law of war experts said that they would not make the use of such an aircraft lawful in these circumstances, since the people on the boat probably lacked equipment to pick up the signal. Okay, so the squawking, one, we don't know if it was really happening during the attack, but it happened elsewhere, at least the people who spotted it earlier, and makes no difference to the people on the boats. Among the legal specialists who said the use of a military transponder signal would not solve a perfidy problem was Todd Huntley, a retired Navy captain who formerly deployed with the Joint Special Operations Command as a Judge Advocate General, or JAG, and directed the Navy's National Security Law Division. Captain Huntley said he could think of legitimate uses for such an aircraft that would make it lawful to have in the arsenal for other contexts, including a hostage rescue scenario in which munitions might be needed for self-defense, but were not intended for launching offensive attacks. Okay. Makes sense. The Trump administration kept the planning for the boat attacks operation closely held, excluding many military lawyers and operational experts who would normally be involved, which is why they weren't on hand to say what perfidy was. Moreover, Defense Secretary Pete Hagueseth has sought to undercut the role of military lawyers as an internal check, including by firing the top service JAGs in February, which is why they were all available and had so much free time on their hands to comment to the New York Times about that. So they set themselves up for failure in that sense, although I'm sure they thought of it as a success. The U.S. military operates several aircraft that are built on civilian airframes, including modified Boeing 737s and Cessna turboprops. Oh, and by the way, Air Force One, which, though, because it is Air Force One, I guess they consider its markings to be military markings, and it does say United States Air Force on it somewhere, but that's a civilian airframe is the point we were getting at. They also, several of these things can launch munitions from internal weapons bays without visible external armaments. So you modify a 737 and it can do it, and that's the answer to the Reddit question. It just wasn't a particularly good question, I don't think. Such aircraft are usually painted gray and have military markings, but military and plane spotting websites show that a few are painted white and have minimal markings. The U.S. military has killed at least 123 people in 35 attacks on boats, including the September 2nd strike. Though I guess it's not clear that they're always using planes like this to do it. A broad range of specialists and laws governing the use of force have said the orders by Mr. Trump and Mr. Hagueseth to attack the boats have been illegal, and the killings have been murders. The military is not allowed to target civilians who pose no imminent threat, even if they are suspected of crimes. The administration has argued that these strikes are lawful and the people on the boats are combatants because Mr. Trump decided the situation was a so-called non-international armed conflict, meaning a war against a non-state actor, between the United States and a secret list of 24 criminal gangs and drug cartels he has deemed terrorists. Do you see how much bootstrapping is going on here? He's determined that we're at war with people he's deemed to be terrorists. This is not good. But it is good to see it in the reporting of the New York Times. I didn't add any commentary in that paragraph. Those were their words. The legitimacy of the claim is widely disputed. Still, it has put attention on the ways particular attacks might have violated the laws of war, like General Lepper and Captain Huntley Jeffrey Korn, with a G, Jeffrey, a retired Lieutenant Colonel JAG officer who was the Army's senior advisor for law of war issues. Might know a thing or two. He said he does not believe that the September 2nd attack took place in an armed conflict. He is now a law professor at Texas Tech University. And Texas Tech University has just lost its accreditation and is being sued by the Donald Trump administration, I'm sure. But he noted that the United States considers perfidy to be a crime in non-international armed conflicts. It charged a Guantanamo detainee before a military commission with that offense over Al-Qaeda's 2000 attack on the USS Cole, in which militants in a small boat floated a hidden bomb up to the side of the warship while waving in a friendly manner. So that's interesting. People sitting in military prisons right now for perfidy against us, but you know how it is. We do things to people. By the way, that Jamel Bowie video that I shared with Scott and with you in Scott's summary of yesterday's show speaks to some of that, some of the, there's really no other word for it, some of the hypocrisy that's sort of built into the way our system works, the one we built for ourselves internationally, right? I mentioned to you the international system that the Trump people are so insistent on destroying and turning upside down was built specifically for the purpose of basically allowing the United States as the global hegemon to get away with all sorts of hypocrisy when it needed to. Why would you tinker with a system like that? Seems almost perfectly designed for a Trump-style foreign policy, military policy, international relations policy. It's just that, I guess that it's more evidence that that's not what he's conducting. He's not operating in the interests of the United States. He's operating in his own interest and nothing else as the putative sovereign of the United States. And that's why the old system, which is built to inure to the benefit of the interests of the United States institutionally, is of no interest to him, even though it offers him all the flexibility anyone could ever want. It's worth going back and taking a look at the video for a number of reasons. It's also fun and entertaining. But where were we? Oh, yes, right. Our third JAG officer, Jeffrey Korn, tells us that the people who perpetrated the USS Cole attack were found guilty of perfidy and are sitting in prison somewhere now, I guess, because of that. Professor Korn said in an assessment of whether the September 2nd attack counted as perfidy would turn on whether the military was trying to make the people on the boat think the aircraft was civilian to, quote, get the jump on them. Interesting. Good question. And does it matter if they just didn't even see the plane? Is that getting the jump on them? Well, they didn't see it. We could have used a military aircraft. They didn't see it anyway. I don't know. The critical question, well, now we'll find out, is whether there is a credible alternative reason for using, different question. Critical question is whether there's a credible alternative reason for using an unmarked aircraft to conduct the attack other than exploiting apparent civilian status to gain some tactical advantage. So that's the story. We've gotten to the end of it, but not by any means, I'm sure, the end of the discussion of it. But maybe just yes for today. I don't know if we have anything to add to that. All right. Other stories that I want to get to. This one will, of course, be of no surprise to you, but needs to be mentioned just so that you have the facts at your command. Totally different. I guess. Who knows whether it's a totally different subject or not. The D.C. pipe bomb suspect from January 6th, actually January 5th, you may remember. They've got a suspect in custody. They're looking to charge him. The local affiliate of the Fox network, Fox 5 WTTG, I think. Is that right? Is reporting this one. D.C. pipe bomb suspect voted for Trump twice, attorney says. But he says more than just that. But that will be no surprise to you that he voted for Trump twice. Although, I guess since he wasn't in custody until recently, it's interesting that he didn't vote for Trump 3 times. But hey, I don't know. Maybe he did. But they're only talking about, all right. So Katie Barlow and Jillian Smith, thank you for writing this up for the local Fox affiliate. Here's the story for the first time. Lawyers representing the accused pipe bomber, Brian Cole Jr., are speaking out on behalf of their client. In a wide-ranging interview, Fox 5 learned more about Cole's political beliefs, specifically that he voted for President Donald Trump twice, and his attorneys plan to argue that Trump's January 6th pardon applies to Cole. I mean, I would argue it too as a defense lawyer. I might secretly hope that, didn't work. But, it'll be a little interesting and controversial. Of course, those pipe bombs were planted the day before on January 5th. And the pardon is for people who participated in the activities of January 6th. So, there's reason to wonder whether or not it applies. You should hope not. And really, honestly, if President Trump cared about politics at all, he should hope not too. It would be very interesting to see how they deal with this one. And if the government argues that it's not applicable and the judge finds that it is, it would be interesting to hear what Trump's reaction is. It'll be interesting just to watch people say, well, I'm for pardoning all the people who, peacefully demonstrated their love on January 6th. But pipe bombs, come on, even we MAGA types agree that that's beyond the pale. That guy had nothing to do with us. I mean, if you were to include him in the pardon, that would be a tacit admission that the pipe bombings was a part of the Day of Love, which, one, the love seems to be missing, and 2, it wasn't on that day. I mean, this is just weird. It's going to be interesting. And I don't think that it would be difficult for the government to argue, no, it doesn't apply to that guy. But I don't know if they'd win that argument. And wow. Anyway, Cole's lawyer, Mario Williams, his brother Luigi Williams, away for the day. Mario Williams, though, says Cole voted for Trump twice before he was arrested and charged with interstate transportation of explosive devices and malicious attempt to use explosive devices in December. So what makes that problematic is that he voted for Trump twice in the same election. In 2024 is what he's doing. I cast 2 ballots for him, and so I'm also guilty of voter fraud. It doesn't say when he voted for him. It's interesting. Williams also says he believes the president's pardon for all January 6th defendants applies to Cole, and it might. Cole's lawyers plan to make a filing with the court soon, laying out their argument that the pardon applies. For the purposes of the pardon, I absolutely agree with it, Williams said. I think you have to employ some kind of common sense as applied to the allegations. So if the allegations are that he went out there and set down those components, and that they were found on January 6th, the judge says that it's part of the January 6th. Well, the judge says that it's part of January 6th apart. I don't know what that means. And says that you are allowed to get a pardon for everything related to the events that occurred on or at the Capitol building on January 6th. Williams says he believes his client should get a pardon, 100%. Well, obviously, you're going to argue that. It wasn't very clearly stated here, but it would really be something for them to argue that, come on, common sense. It does. Common sense does tell you this was part of the activity at January 6th. It just, undermines their whole claim, which is stupid and should be undermined about what happened at January 6th. All right, there's a little bit more. The text of Trump's pardon is broad. It says the president can. It says that he can. It should say that he does. Quote, grant a full, complete, and unconditional pardon to all other individuals convicted of offenses related to the events that occurred at or near the United States Capitol on January 6th, 2021. So at or near. So he planted the bombs, of course, outside the headquarters of the Republican and Democratic national committees. They are in the neighborhood of Capitol Hill, but they're not part of the Capitol complex. So at or near would cover that. It does say on January 6th, but there's a lot of problems with this. Full and unconditional pardon, fine. All other individuals convicted of offenses related. Now, he has not been convicted of an offense. So I don't know if he can get a preemptive pardon. Maybe he has to go through trial, be convicted, and then make his claim for the pardon then, and maybe they would even grant it. I don't know if the judge is going to be that, to go that route or not. But, at or near the Capitol on January 6th, well, how about at or near the Capitol on January 5th and continuing it is kind of odd if you plant the bomb on January 5th, but, well, they took their time finding it. They only found it on January 6th, so it's an activity of January 6th. Now, your activity is not January. Well, okay. But people were in town on January 5th in anticipation of January 6th. I don't really have that much problem including that in the activities of January 6th, but he hasn't been convicted. Anyway, the government says Cole confessed to making the homemade devices and walked investigators through how he built them before driving to Washington, D.C. and placing them outside the Republican National Convention. No, Republican National Headquarters. Yeah, well, I don't know why they say convention. That's just wrong. The Republican National Convention and Democratic National Convention headquarters the night before Congress certified Joe Biden's victory. Well, I guess I know why. Maybe this was even a little bit AI assisted or something, or they're just, not that really versed in what they're covering. But it's the DNC and the RNC headquarters. And sometimes around convention time, the DNC is the Democratic National Convention. Every other time, it's the Democratic National Committee, whose job it is to hold the Democratic National Convention every 4 years. But anyway, When the government put details of what they call Cole's confession in a public filing, Cole's lawyers demanded to see the evidence. They're going to do that. Williams says he has now watched footage of Cole's interview after his arrest. He says the statements that are in the government's filing are missing context. And at some point, the government is making affirmative false statements. I don't doubt that with this DOJ. But anyway, when asked if he felt the government was directly lying about his client, Williams said, I believe the manner in which the government made those statements is incorrect and acontextual, and in some cases absolutely false. So that's a yes. Some of the representations that the government made, in our opinion, are false, he went on to say. So that's an even clearer yes. But it's legal. It's a lawyer paid by the hour way of saying yes. Prosecutors say Cole confessed to placing the devices outside the Republican National Committee. Yes, and Democratic National Committee headquarters. Wouldn't that be something, by the way, if they ruined this prosecution by saying they were outside the convention in the filings and like somehow a judge said, no, you can't correct that? I don't know. I mean, dumber things have happened. And dumber things have been done on purpose by the Trump administration, too, by the way. It would be interesting for them to throw it, to take a dive on this prosecution and let this guy skate and not even require a pardon. Anyway, let's see. This was all done, of course, just hours before a mob of President Donald Trump's supporters stormed the Capitol. Controversial statement. They say he told investigators he hoped the explosives would detonate and hoped there would be news about it. After his arrest, Cole told investigators he believed someone needed to speak up for people who thought the 2020 election was stolen and that he targeted both political parties because they were, quote, in charge, according to prosecutors. Prosecutors say Cole continued to buy bomb-making components for months after January 6th. It became a hobby for him, I guess. Investigators used credit card records, cell phone tower data, and license plate reader to identify Cole, according to an FBI affidavit. So there you have it. Interesting angle on the pardon issue as well. Speaking of all the technology that they use, a very interesting addition to our understanding of federal law enforcement or fake federal law enforcement operations in the ICE and Border Patrol context, something from 404 Media that, it's on top of the news by virtue of having been added to Instapaper last of all of the most recent articles. Inside ICE's tool to monitor phones in entire neighborhoods, Joseph Cox writes up just a couple of days ago on the 8th of January for 404 Media. So something to be aware of in the protest context as well. Probably no surprise to you that your cell phones are being tracked, more or less all the time anyway, by the commercial phone service providers, and that they have very often agreed to share some of the non-personally identifying data. But the point, of course, for their getting a hold of that data is that they can mix it with some other special sauce and make it personally identifying and then come arrest you. And I think no surprise to most of you. And those of you who like to take your phones with you to protests and video it and share that video because you think it's First Amendment protected speech, it is. It's just, quote unquote, federal law enforcement at this point is not honoring the dictates of the First Amendment. So it might be wiser to leave the video to, I guess if the local television station has come and take video, fine. Or to other braver souls or people who have virtual private networks, perhaps. But you could opt to leave your trackable cell phone at home during such a protest. A social media and phone surveillance system that ICE bought access to, is designed to monitor a city, neighborhood, or block for mobile phones, track the movements of those devices and their owners over time, and follow them from their places of work to home or other locations, according to material that describes how the system works, obtained by 404 Media. Commercial location data, in this case acquired from hundreds of millions of phones via a company called PenLink, can be queried without a warrant, according to an internal ICE legal analysis shared with 404 Media. It might be right. I could believe that they are right. There's much more ability to get this information than you would think or wish under the First Amendment or any other, or Fourth Amendment or whatever else. But it could also be the case that, no, it can't be accessed without a warrant. Why are you saying that? Don't say that. It's a lie. Commercial location data, in this case, acquired from hundreds of millions of phones through Penlink. They say requires no warrant. The purchase comes squarely during ICE's mass deportation effort and continued crackdown on protected speech, alarming civil liberties experts and raising questions on what exactly ICE will use the surveillance system for. Open question. I guess now jumping back to Instapaper to read some of the rest of this. This is a very dangerous tool in the hands of an out-of-control agency. This granular location information paints a detailed picture of who we are, where we go, and who we spend time with. Nathan Freed Wessler, Deputy Project Director of the American Civil Liberties Union's Speech, Privacy, and Technology Project, told 404 Media. And we'll stop there. You get the idea. Just a reminder of what they're doing and what they're spending their time with when they are monitoring you. All right. Now, I thought I might jump into some of the other... Well, now I won't jump into anything because it's almost time for... Well, it is time for our top of the hour break. But this will give me a chance to review what's been going on social media. There are probably a couple of things I might want to scoop up that might not necessarily be parked in Instapaper, but that will remind me of stories I wanted to share with you. Okay. Well, oh yes, right. One in the AP, as a matter of fact, and maybe we'll throw that in there just as a teaser and then come back to it. But the AP News, when they posted it online on social media, gave this summary in their post. An independent counsel has demanded a death sentence for ex-South Korean leader Yoon Suk-yeol on rebellion charges in connection with his martial law imposition in 2024, a court confirms. Well. That is an interesting development there. Boy, from all the surprising quarters. Teen Vogue really kicking it, and so are the Koreans. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm going to resist the temptation to read the entirety of the article, but it is a fascinating subject, certainly, and I bet there's a lot of interesting nuance that we can and should pick up by reading it. But I mean, what more for the moment do you need to know than that over in South Korea, where their now ex-president tried to impose martial law against all odds and against all reason, they now are recommending that he be sentenced to death. Now, they haven't tried and convicted him at this point, but the point is that the special investigators are saying that'll be that's our recommendation for the end ask in the sentencing phase of this thing, assuming we get a conviction here. And it's just interesting. And I made, flippant mention at the end, right? I'm just thinking about all the times where Teen Vogue or lately People Magazine or even GQ have provided more insightful and more clear-eyed reporting and conclusion drawing than many of the mainstream news sources we might otherwise turn to for such things, or we used to turn to for such insight. And it's always surprising and refreshing when we find out that that's the case. And there's a whole country that actually acts that way, as it turns out. But we've said this a number of times. Most of the world, throughout most of history, has reacted to the events in their countries that most resemble what we saw here on January 6, 2021, with saying, okay, that guy has now failed to take over the country again. I mean, he's technically president of the country right now, but he's on his way out. So that on January 7th or thereabouts, and if you wanted to wait until, say, January 21st, 2021, you would arrest and suggest to the arresting authorities that this person ought to be put on trial for their life. But we don't do that in this country, and we're not even sure we're going to do it at all. And maybe presidents are immune before, during, and after their presidencies for everything there ever was. The end. That's where it now stands. The Korean story will be interesting to me, although I don't know if they covered this, but hearkening way, way back, now would be a good time to bring these things back. We read a couple of articles, I think, on the air that described the more granularly, more particularly, the context and the mindset of President Yoon, ex-President Yoon, when he was seeking to impose martial law and keep himself in office, that in fact, in particular, he had been on record publicly having essentially bought into weirdo YouTube brain poison, very much along the lines of, well, Donald Trump, Sidney Powell, the Pillow Guy, Mike Flynn, and all of the rest of the worst of the most brain-poisoned American Republicans, and that he wasn't alone. You know, America's not alone in having a accidentally and unfortunately ruling class of people handed constitutional power who appear to have lost their faculties. In South Korea, they say, you're under arrest for that, and we might put you on trial for your life. In America, we say, what can you do? It's all immune. Sorry. Mostly because, by the way, of the presumption that underlies the Constitution that those activities will be undertaken in the interests of the United States. And even when they clearly are not, well, you can't prove that they're not. So what can you do? And we're just going to have to let it all go and roll the dice and hope we can fix it at the ballot box. And by the way, you're also immune from trying to rig it at the ballot box, if you like. So, okay. What else might we want to include in our roundup? Let's jump back into Instapaper and take a look. Collection of other stories that maybe doesn't build the same narrative. I mean, it does I'm reminded of 10 different things, but let's run through some of these stories. Eric Adams, what's he up to? He's not the mayor anymore. He's out. Happened on January 1st, right? They inaugurated Zoran Mamdani, by all accounts doing very well, and probably eating very well in Gracie Mansion. But at any rate, what's Eric Adams up to? Well, of course, freed from the strictures of government, he is stealing money. That's what he's up to. I think he immediately took a trip overseas, maybe to what might even have been to Turkey, where his benefactors are from. But he's returned to the United States to steal money now. Former New York City Mayor Eric Adams has launched and rug pulled a meme coin. I know. Where are we? What does that mean? Who would have thought that this could have been possible? What do any of those words mean? He launched a crypto token of his own, which you can do now. And very frequently, almost exclusively, the only thing that's going on when you're launching these things is planning a rug pull. The Block.co, The Block, has this report, and really all I can do at this point with a story like this one is to read it to you and hope that we understand the jargon. There's almost no chance that I'll be able to explain it along the way, but hopefully you've heard this term enough that you know what it means. Former New York City Mayor Eric Adams' meme coin faces rug pull allegations, which is how you say it if you don't want to be sued for jumping to the conclusion that former New York City Mayor Eric Adams has rug pulled his meme coin. Allegedly. There. Now we're out of trouble. Daniel Kuhn is the name of the reporter, Kuhn, a January 12th entry. So today's the 13th. So just yesterday. All right. What's up? Do we read the quick take bullet points? Nah, let's read the article. Former New York City Mayor Eric Adams promoted a meme coin on Monday. I mean, this is some fast moving stuff. It's Tuesday right now. And they wrote this on Monday. So that just gives you an idea of how unserious a meme coin could possibly be. If you launch it on Monday, rug pull it on Monday, and they can still write the article about how you rug pulled it on Monday, you're really kidding yourself. All right. Former New York City Mayor Eric Adams promoted a meme coin on Monday that some observers alleged had been rugged. Wow. New terminology developing from this already rapidly developing technology. Every minute, there's a new word for it and a new nickname for it. Adams, who left office on January 1st, unveiled the NYC token, like a subway token, the NYC token, and a related website at a press conference at Times Square on Monday, according to several local media sources. So literally, Times Square launch on Monday, and by Monday night, there's already a rug pull article about it. That's incredible. However, several hours after the event, on-chain activity, right, blockchain, on-chain activity suggested that a large share of the token's liquidity might have been withdrawn. Rune Crypto alerted on X that at least $3.4 million had been drained. Why would you get yourself involved in something like this? Unless as a straight up bribe and, I ran out of kava bags, so I'll just buy the meme coin instead. Another user, ex-user, Star Platinum, also warned that the project appears to be highly centralized and carries elevated risk. And quite honestly, the minute you find out that it's an Eric Adams meme coin, like effing duh, of course it's carries risk, elevated risk. On-chain trading visualization platform, and the name of this one is Bubble Maps. I mean, I feel like I'm talking to a Martian. On-chain trading visualization platform Bubble Maps. You haven't said a word that anybody over 50 understands so far. Okay. Well, they also flagged unusual liquidity activity around the token. I think I'm discerning the meaning here, but the platform pointed out that a wallet, parentheses, this is the name of the wallet, the tag by which the wallet goes, 9TY4M. I don't know what it means, which is connected to the token deployer. That's the important point. Removed roughly $2.5 million in USDC. US dollar. What is USDC? US dollars, I understand. USDC, is it like cash? What's the C for? USD coin. Okay, there we are. USDC or USD. I mean, do I trust this is the AI answer from Google? USDC or USD coin is a widely used and regulated stable coin in the cryptocurrency market. It's designed to maintain a stable value by being pegged to the US dollar on a one-to-one basis. So, okay, that helps us figure out why they think it's worth $2.5 million, even though it wasn't dollars per se that were withdrawn here. So I guess that's just to be accurate. Okay, so where was that? Right, so anyway, they removed roughly $2.5 million in USDC at the market peak and later added back about $1.5 million after the token price had dropped more than 60%. So maybe they're planning a second rug pull. That's kind of interesting. And it is also interesting, well, gee whiz, how did they know so well to remove $2.5 million at the market peak? But yeah, might be chicken and egg here. I mean, the market peaked. It could have gone higher, but the point is, the point at which they decided to remove $2.5 million sent the market plummeting on this thing. So that was the market peak. You made it the market peak, but okay. Anyway, Bubble Maps described the pattern as reminiscent of the controversial launch of the Libra token, where liquidity was also observed to be heavily manipulated. The block has reached out to Adams. Oh, I guess that's why it's the block, like as in blockchain. The block has reached out to Adams for further comment and information. The project's website states that the token is deployed on Solana with a total supply of 1 billion. Not dollars or whatever, but just 1 billion. They're going to make 1 billion tokens. Is that what it is? It also says that 70% of the supply would be allocated to what it calls a NYC token reserve and would not be included in the planned circulating supply. That's Eric Adams holding on to it, of course. The former NYC mayor said at the press briefing that the NYC token is designed to help fund initiatives to address, quote, anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, and other of Adams's professed concerns, using revenues generated by the token directed to an unnamed nonprofit, according to a New York Post report. As Walmart is using blockchains to deal with their food chain and transparency, we know cities can run better, and by using this New York City token, he says it twice, and they quote it twice, we're going to continue to invest in making our city a safer city, Adams said, cited by NYP, New York Post. Adams, who was replaced as New York City, it says NYC, but no, New York City Mayor by Zoran Mamdani on January 1st. It's Mamdani York City now, MYC. Has been a vocal supporter of the crypto and wider tech sectors because he knew he could steal a bunch of money from it. I think we're pretty much done discussing this, but apparently he's had a history with cryptocurrency before, and he's crooked, and he's now combining his two great loves, crookedness and meme coins, which honestly, he didn't have to combine. But he meant his own crookedness in his own pockets, I guess, is what's making the real difference. So no surprise there, but there it is. More other news. Let's see. I'm going to run down the Instapaper entries here from MS Now, or Ms. Now, or M. Snow, depending on how you read it. The new MSNBC has now become MS Now, I guess. Top DOJ officials quit after their division refused to probe the Minnesota ICE shooting. Our subheader gives us more context. At least 4 leaders of the Civil Rights Division, the once storied Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, resigned because their section's head, Harmeet Dillon, decided not to investigate the shooting of Renee Good. That is to say, they claimed federal preemption of the whole thing the other day, and then once they claimed that they were the only ones who could investigate, they decided not to investigate. We'll see whether the state believes they're really the only ones who can investigate. Carol Leonig and Ken Delanian report this for Masno. At least 4 leaders of the Justice Department unit that investigates police killings have resigned in protest over the administration's handling of a fatal shooting of a motorist in Minneapolis by an Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer, according to 3 people briefed on the departures. Top leaders of the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division have left their jobs to register their frustration with the department after the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, decided not to investigate the ICE officer's fatal shooting of Renee Good last week. The criminal section of the division would normally investigate any fatal shooting by a law enforcement officer and specializes in probing potential or alleged abuse or improper use of force by law enforcement. The departures, including that of the chief of the section, or chief of section, as they often just say, as well as the principal deputy chief, and, yes, the acting deputy chief, all the people that they would normally replace the section chief with, represent the most significant mass resignation at the Justice Department since February. At that time, 5 leaders, that is to say back in February, 5 leaders and supervisors of the department's public integrity section, which investigates public officials for possible corruption. Who might that be? No one knows. Well, they resigned rather than comply with an appointee of President Donald Trump's orders to dismiss the bribery case against then New York Mayor Eric Adams. Isn't that something? Well, I had no idea, actually, reading these stories back to back would be so informative. I really did not know that they were connected. What do you know? I wish I did. You know what? Forget that. I'm putting together a genius show. That's all you need to know. I mean, there are no accidents. There are no coincidences, they say. They don't say that I'm supposed to get credit for them being intentional, but it just, the universe did it. But I prefer to claim credit for it. One source briefed on the reasoning for the resignation said the handling of the ICE shooting was not the only concern, I'm sure it isn't, for the unit leaders, and that some were concerned about other decisions by division leadership. I assume this would sort of be the final straw in all of this. A paper straw, though. Anyway, investigating officials to determine if they broke the law, defied policy, failed to de-escalate, and resorted to deadly force without basis is one of the Civil Rights Division's most solemn duties, said Kristen Clark, who led the division in the Biden administration. Prosecutors of the Civil Rights Division have for decades been the nation's leading experts in this work. A Justice Department official did not dispute the departures. That would be something. Why not? We deny it entirely. Sure. deny, I'm told, is part of the game plan. But they did say that the officials had requested early retirement prior to the Minnesota shooting, adding that, quote, any suggestion to the contrary is false. They probably did. And then they were like, forget it. I'm not even waiting for this paperwork to get processed. I got to leave now. Good's shooting on January 7th has galvanized Democrats and civil libertarians, in case they're not already Democrats, but also frustrated Minnesota politicians and state police investigators. On January 10th, the FBI announced that it would be handling the investigation of Good's shooting on its own and blocked Minnesota authorities from their typical role in reviewing evidence and investigating the shooting themselves. On Tuesday night, the state of Minnesota and the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul filed a lawsuit attempting to block the Trump administration's immigration enforcement actions there, which Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announced would grow following Good's death. Vice President J.D. Vance has defended the ICE officer, saying one day after Good's death and with no investigation that the shooting was justified. Trump himself made inaccurate claims that Good had, quote, run over the ICE officer, which video evidence contradicts. Democrats accused the Trump administration of trying to seize the evidence in the shooting as part of what they called a cover-up. And here I should note something I didn't mention on the air, but I've been thinking about, and you've probably seen, as I did on social media the other day, some intrepid reporters on site outside of the shooter's home watching masked ICE officers carrying out boxes and boxes of what I guess would be evidence of something, but removing it from the house so that one, state and local investigators can't get their hands on it, and who knows what happens to it. It just, actually a huge violation of protocols. This is a crime scene. There should be an investigation going on, and what are they removing from his house? And is it bomb-making equipment? Well, I don't know. I'm just saying. It could be. It was very bulky. It was in several black containers, the big black plastic yellow-topped cargo containers they were carrying out of there. Anyway, let's see. Late last week, according to a source briefed on the matter, a deputy for Dillon relayed to the criminal section that Dillon had decided the office would not conduct a separate DOJ investigation of the ICE officer and whether he improperly used deadly force. And I guess that's a separate and parallel investigation to what the FBI might conduct, even though the FBI is part of the DOJ. So the Civil Rights Division wouldn't be doing anything. And the FBI will take care of it. We just don't think there's a civil rights element to it. And also we're not taking care of it. Okay. Right. Dillon's decision not to have her criminal section investigate the ICE officer's shooting of Good was first reported by CBS News. In the days after the ICE officer shot Good, Dillon retweeted a post on X in which a prosecutor warned people not to ram ICE officers because they will use deadly force. While federal officials claim Good was driving into the officer, video evidence shows her wheels were turned away from him when the officer opened fire and killed her. The Department's Civil Rights Division was created in the wake of the 1957 Civil Rights Act to protect the constitutional rights of all Americans. So I guess we're done with that. The division had about 380 attorneys when Trump took office in January, but quickly saw a large exodus after Dillon took the helm, as she insisted the division would align itself with the president's priorities. She said in April that she welcomed the departures of civil rights lawyers. I think that's fine, Dillon said. We don't want people in the federal government who feel like it's their pet project to go persecute police department based on statistical evidence or persecute people praying outside abortion facilities instead of doing violence, which is what they should be doing. The job here is to enforce the federal civil rights laws, not woke ideology or, in fact, anything at all. So there you have it. Interesting new twist on all of that. Back to Instapaper and see what else. All right, there's the PERFIIIIDY article. I skipped a bunch of them in chronological order, reverse chronological order, to get you to the PERFIIIIDY story of the day. This one, I think, also we may not be able to read because it's a Wall Street Journal article and we might be blocked from it. Oh, I guess we got a gift version of it. That's nice and exclusive. So it's a good thing that we got access to it. But here, maybe headline and a few paragraphs just to get the gist of what's going on. Trump has complained about Pam Bondi repeatedly to aides. So this, too, makes it look like a genius progression from Harmeet Dillon at the DOJ's Civil Rights Division one more step up the ladder, well, all the way up the ladder at the DOJ to Pam Bondi. Given that the DOJ is operating this way and pushing all of its woke civil rights attorneys out the door, and everybody else as well, the Public Integrity Division, et cetera, you'd think that Trump was super happy with Pam Bondi, but guess what? It's not enough. It's never enough. Trump, of course, understands that phenomenon. His sons never get enough from him. We always want more money, Dad. Just give us some stuff. We don't want to work. Just, I want to buy, let's say, I don't know, cocaine and airplanes and hunting rifles. Like as an example. Just pulled out of thin air. No particular reason to think that they're actually doing it. I'm not even alleging that they do. But, more. Everybody wants more. And now Trump wants more too. It's always been his MO. You hate to see it in other people, but you love to see it in me. Anyway, all right. Josh Dawsey, Sadie Gurman, and C. Ryan Barber. Let me see if I can't read this whole thing in the online version. No, is the answer. I think Wall Street Journal is one of those operations where you can read it once and that's it. But okay, back to Instapaper where you can read it twice. President Trump has complained to aides repeatedly in recent weeks about not enough hamburgers, but also angry about Attorney General Pam Bondi, describing her as weak and an ineffective enforcer of his agenda, administration officials and other people familiar with his complaints said. They are turning loose the January 6th defendants. They're trying to free Tita Peters. They're gassing their own people like Saddam. Well, not the same gas, of course. It's not the same. But it's an interesting line to throw out there. Gassing everybody in sight in Minnesota, shooting people through the windshields of their cars when they're driving away. All the various insanities going on. Cover-up of the Epstein files. Cover-up of everything. Dismissal of cases against Trump himself. Efforts to settle cases where Trump is suing the DOJ, but all not enough for Donald Trump. What else does he want? Well, the criticisms appear to be part of an intense campaign by Trump to pressure the Justice Department to more aggressively pursue his priorities, of course. Some of the officials said Trump has previously criticized Bondi at times, but his vocal concerns about his attorney general have grown more frequent in recent months, officials said. This month, Trump has talked with allies about how he could appoint special counsels at the Justice Department because he is so frustrated with what he sees as the slow progress of its work, people familiar with the matter said. Now, the wheels of justice do turn slowly. Yes, get me some wheels that turn faster, or if you can't turn justice's wheels faster, get me something other than justice that looks like it might be, feasibly described to others as justice, but that has faster turning wheels. Can we get that to happen? Chief among his grievances is what he sees as Bondi's failure to quickly and effectively prosecute the investigators who had pursued him for years, including former FBI Director James Comey and New York Democratic Attorney General Letitia James. Now, they've tried indicting these guys already, and they successfully indicted, they managed to get an indictment handed up against Comey, but then those indictments ended up being dismissed because of other very, very dumb stuff that the Trump DOJ was involved with. So I guess he could be blaming her for that. But, all of those things were done at his behest. He just can't blame himself for it. And, of course, Letitia James, they've dismissed all of the things. And in some cases, they tried to re-indict her and were unsuccessful in doing so. So it's a mixed bag whether you can say they successfully indicted her. But had they successfully indicted her, it's the trial would not have started yet. But, Trump is impatient, and also he might die before the trial happens. And that probably worries him. Both criminal cases, of course, against Comey and James were dismissed in November by a judge who said the Trump aide who secured the indictments had been improperly appointed to her post. That is, of course, Lindsay Halligan. Trump has wanted to see the cases continue quickly, but one of the things you need to get in this country is an indictment, and he doesn't know or understand or acknowledge that that's the case. Why aren't they dead? Why aren't they in prison? Well, we have a criminal justice system. Well, let's not have it. Who says we have it? Bondi? Get rid of Bondi. Also interesting that they they describe the person who claimed to be the acting U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia as a Trump aide, as opposed to, well, the purported acting U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. That's a weird thing. A Trump aide what was it? They say that it was dismissed. The cases were dismissed by a judge who said the Trump aide who secured the indictment. Not really, but that I guess just points up the politicization of the department, the weaponization of the Department of Justice. They're now Trump aides over there.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. One more segment. That's all we've got. We'll try and jam-pack it. I want to read more of the Wall Street Journal article about how Trump is unhappy with Bondi just because it's fun, and we get to think about Pam Bondi being thrown under the bus, and just a continuation of the regular MO over at the Trump White House. Everybody serves at Trump's pleasure, and Trump's pleasure never lasts more than a couple of months. Except for Stephen Miller, somehow, amazingly enough. And it may just be that Trump's pleasure is, outsourced to Stephen Miller. He just, bops around the White House eating hamburgers and playing golf, and Stephen Miller decides what Trump's pleasure actually is. Anyway, so as we said, chief among his grievances with Bondi, he hasn't seen James Comey or Letitia James thrown in jail and executed. And although there's nothing about the way that the criminal justice system actually operates in this country that indicates that would ever happen, even if you just try to rig it and force it through, you got to get through grand juries. And so really his frustration is with those. Maybe Pam Bondi can convince Donald Trump to abolish grand juries by executive order. That's probably next. Or she just goes under the bus at some point. And it's better that she end up under the bus, really, but that's not necessarily the way this is going to go. A Justice Department investigation into another one of Trump's antagonists, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, became public on Sunday night. Powell, whom Trump has publicly berated and pressured to lower interest rates, disclosed that the Justice Department was pursuing a criminal investigation over his testimony last summer about the central bank's building renovation project. You'll recall that Trump has for months been criticizing Powell as though he were personally responsible for cost overruns for renovating Federal Reserve buildings. He is not, but they're seeking to turn it into something criminal by, they're, again, bootstrapping something else. Well, we're angry about the cost overruns, but we can't arrest him for that. One, he's not responsible for it. And two, even if he was, it wouldn't be a criminal violation. So how do they rig something up? Well, he testified to Congress about the renovations, and Congress was concerned, Republicans at least in Congress, were concerned about the cost overruns. They really weren't. But I put that out there only to say, surely Democrats were also concerned about cost overruns, and they have to, now run up to the microphone to say, we agree with our Republican colleagues. it's a certain game you have to play there. But the truth is that even the Republicans were not actually concerned with the cost overruns. They just wanted to yell at Jerome Powell, even though it would be worth pointing out at this point, how did Jerome Powell get to be the Fed chair, the Board of Governors chair? And the answer is Donald Trump nominated him for that. Or at least we think he did, because you're never sure whether the paperwork is valid when somebody gets appointed by Donald Trump. But anyway, once again, somebody else going under the bus. There is no retaining the favor of Donald Trump so far, as we said, except for Stephen Miller. But when the day comes and he gets mad with him and throws him under the bus, I want to get my bus driver's license. Anyway, point is that he's mad at Bondi now, and one of the other reasons is he's not getting Jerome Powell executed fast enough. Oh yes, right, the bootstrapping that they were doing. So they had him testify to Congress. They asked him, hey, what about these cost overruns? And he said, well, here's the story with that. They were unsatisfied with that explanation. They want to turn that into, well, you're lying. Like they're a bunch of 5-year-olds. You lied to us about that. No, I told you the truth, but circumstances ended up being, how much will this cost? We thought it would originally cost $2 billion. It looks like it'll cost almost $3 billion in the end. Okay, but if it comes out to $3.1 billion or not, it doesn't even matter. Well, you lied to us. You said one time you said it was going to be $2 billion. Yeah, and then I said it looks like it's going to turn into $3. Yeah, but once you said 2. So that was a lie. You lied to Congress. That's perjury. That's criminal. We're going to prosecute you. That's what's going on. That's it. I mean, it's cobbled together and it's stupid, and everybody knows that's not what happened here. But he's trying to make it so that the Justice Department is doing the 5-year-old thing. You said I could have ice cream. I said you could have ice cream if you finished your dinner. You lied to me. Anyway, Trump has also complained frequently about that Bondi's handling of the FBI's investigation files into the convicted sex offender. What's his name again? Jeffrey Epstein. Right, yeah, that's the guy. Didn't he have an island near St. Croix where that unmarked plane was? That's right. It's really near St. Thomas, but U.S. Virgin Islands. Again, what a show. Anyhow, he's complaining about how they handled the Epstein files and has created months of political and personal headaches from him. Officials familiar with the complaint said when the White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles told Vanity Fair, amazingly enough, that Bondi whiffed on her handling of the files, and she did. Trump told staff that he agreed with Wiles, 2 officials said, and that made Wiles' year. Anyway, he has also heard from conservative activists and influencers criticizing Bondi and collected similar social media posts that he asked other aides about, the officials said. Cat turd wants you gone, Pam. And Trump has expressed frustration that the Justice Department hasn't done more to pursue those he claims helped steal the 2020 election, which he lost. Some of the people familiar with the complaint said, although that's what all of his prosecutions have actually been about. He just forgets that's what they were motivated by. We can't prosecute them for that, or at least we don't think so. And maybe he's angry about that. Yes, you can. Go ahead, do it. You can't prosecute Jerome Powell for lying to Congress. Yes, you can. Go ahead, do it. All right. At times, Trump has complained to Bondi directly about his frustrations with the department. Bondi has grown increasingly concerned in the past month about Trump's complaints. People in touch with her say a spokesman, it says, for Bondi said she has been focused on executing Trump's directive to make America safe again. Although, to be honest, I've been focusing on the same. But anyhow, in a statement to the Wall Street Journal on Friday afternoon, Trump said, Pam is doing an excellent job. She has been my friend for many years. That's true, of course. For $25,000, she buried the Trump University charges. Tremendous progress has been made against the radical left lunatics who are good at only one thing, cheating in elections and the crimes they commit. Every accusation, of course, being a confession. The White House also sent Friday statements from Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Wiles, and other senior administration officials, all praising Bondi. So I'm sure she was happy about that. Vance said Bondi has the full support of President Trump and myself, which means, bus wheels. And Wiles called Bondi incredibly talented, smart, and hardworking. Late Friday, the Fed received grand jury subpoenas from the Justice Department that threaten a criminal indictment. The Fed received grand jury subpoenas. Right, okay. The Bondi spokesman said she had instructed her U.S. attorneys, or really probably a bunch of acting U.S. attorneys, to prioritize investigating any abuses of taxpayer dollars. Interestingly, by the way, at this point, you know that investigation happening in D.C., that means box wine enthusiast and television reality show judge Jeanine Pirro is in charge of this. I have something somewhere. I think maybe it was a Blue Sky post note to self here about looking up the Pirro thing that suggests that there are articles out there, and I may even have parked it in Instapaper. We'll have to go and see. Suggests that she freelanced this, that it wasn't Bondi directing her to do it, but that she said, I think I can get this done. Give me a box of wine. And then went ahead and did it and didn't coordinate with anybody. Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. Maybe they're setting Pirro up too. Who cares? We'll, let them all end up under the bus. Trump is still at times warm personally with Bondi, a blonde, I'll add, but they say a former Florida attorney general who was once one of his personal attorneys, including at the Kennedy Center Honors ceremony that Trump hosted last month, according to a person familiar with their interactions. Other officials of the Justice Department have also come under criticism from the president. People familiar with the criticism said Trump's comments on Bondi reflect some of his MAGA supporters have made, I guess. I've read it wrong, but the gist of the article is right. While she once enjoyed the strong backing among several of the president's voters given her history with the president, longtime Trump ally Steve Bannon said Bondi is now, quote, bleeding support from her and President Trump's most loyal troops. Folks are desperate for action and just haven't seen it, Bannon said, providing a list of topics that the president's supporters want her to bring more cases on, including the 2020 election and the Justice Department's investigation into Trump campaign ties to Russia in the 2016 election. That is to say, they don't want those things investigated. They want the investigators who investigated them investigated. You know what I mean? And guess what? Everybody hates having the Justice Department move slowly. She's got a Merrick Garland problem. Democrats, rank and file Democrats, a lot of them angry with Merrick Garland saying that he moved too slowly and deliberately and all this. And he did, but, for good reasons. I don't know whether Pam Bondi actually has good reasons for moving slowly and deliberately, but they're angry with her just the same. Wouldn't that be something? What an interesting parallel that is, given, the realities that, real people who understand that these things do move slowly know about the way Garland and the way he's defended very often by Empty Wheel. Marcy, who, I think has come to learn enough to know what she's talking about. In that context, who will be Pam Bondi's empty wheel? That's the big question. All right. They don't have the capacity to tolerate it on that side, I don't think. So there you go. Bondi has been less visible around the White House in recent months, officials said. She didn't appear with Trump to announce the extraordinary capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. That's a good and interesting point. Even though her agency was the one whose prosecution underpinned the arrest, a Justice Department official said that Bondi was following Maduro's seizure in real time, and the travel logistics combined with the sensitive nature of the operation kept her from attending. Vance on Thursday also announced an unusual arrangement, the creation of a high-ranking Justice Department post to investigate fraud, and that would be run by the White House and answerable to Trump directly instead of Bondi. And Bondi thanked Vance in a post on social media. Thanks for creating this post that doesn't report to me. She worked with the White House on the position, the department officials said, with she and Vance choosing it over the appointment of a special counsel. So Trump has explored, can't we get a special counsel in here? And she's like, let's try something else. Let's make up a new position that doesn't exist instead. Trump's recent criticisms echo the fraught. By the way, this is what an interesting. I got to stop here. It occurred to me that the compromise position that she landed on with Vance if they really actually work together on this, is what about if we created somebody who works for the DOJ, but reports directly to the president instead of the attorney general? That's the compromise position that the attorney general has suggested rather than go the special counsel route, which is interesting because the special counsel, remember that the special counsel, by the way, is a replacement for the once more frequently used, but now I guess somehow unconstitutional, independent counsel position. So they jettisoned the independent thing and said, all right, they really are answerable to the DOJ and the Attorney General. So the Attorney General says, what if they weren't answerable to me and they were even less independent and they reported directly to the president, even though they were supposed to be investigating the president? Would that be a good compromise? Trump says, yes. Fantastic. And Bondi says, sure, go ahead and do it. And she's still going under the bus. Trump's recent criticisms echo the fraught relationships he's had with his first-term attorneys general. He pushed out Jeff Sessions over the Russia probe. William Barr ultimately had to resign. Of course, well, had to. Ultimately did. Just ultimately resigned after saying investigators had found no widespread fraud that would have changed Trump's 2020 election loss. The better an attorney is, the more process-oriented they're going to be, and that is in direct opposition to what Trump wants, which is someone who is outcome-oriented, says, correctly, Sarah Isgur, who served as spokeswoman for Sessions at the Justice Department. Wow, I thought this must be some freako-pinkazoid liberal. All right, it's not. He can never find an attorney general because by definition, they can't be a great lawyer. That's really something. Thanks, Sarah. Bondi, 60 years old, has pursued many of Trump's priorities after taking the job in February, firing prosecutors who had worked on investigations of him and praising him in frequent Fox News appearances. She authorized the U.S. attorney in Florida to reinvestigate the government's assessment of Russian interference in the 2016 election, which Trump has portrayed as a criminal plot by Democrats to undermine his first presidency. Prosecutors have issued dozens of subpoenas as part of the inquiry, but no charges have been filed. Trump's building frustration with Bondi spilled into public view in September when he pushed her to prosecute Comey and James in a social media post that he had intended to send as a private message. Remember that one? He installed Lindsay Halligan, a White House aide, to run the federal prosecutor's office in Virginia handling the probes, and she indicted indicted Comey and James within weeks of her arrival, but that didn't work. Cases have been on life support after a judge ruled Halligan's appointment was unlawful and dismissed both prosecutions. The Justice Department has failed to persuade at least 2 grand juries to indict James since then. Nearly a month after the judge dismissed charges against Comey and James, the Justice Department filed notices of appeal in both cases. The Justice Department's continuing release of the Epstein files, how did that get in here, has also kept Trump's past relationship with the disgraced financier in the spotlight, to Trump's exasperation. Not that he wanted the files out, of course. Trump has said he cut off ties long before Epstein was arrested in 2006. That's not true, as the Justice Department released tranches of new Epstein files, and only 1% of them at that. Over the holidays, Trump again complained about Bondi's handling of them. Several officials said amid the criticism, Bondi has sought to respond to Trump's request. In November, hours after Trump demanded the Justice Department investigate prominent Democrats who were named in the Epstein documents, Bondi directed Manhattan's U.S. attorney to lead the probe and addressed it on social media. Thank you, Mr. President. May I have another? She probably should have added. How do you like that? So, interesting development there. Let's see, what else is in Instapaper? And I think I meant to make a note to myself. Oh, was it the Piro thing that I wanted to find? Yeah, that might be buried elsewhere. All right, we got to hit a couple of other things. I guess maybe today will be about clearing out the top level of things that have been parked in Instapaper, but also a good potpourri type show, things that are escaping our notice because of the fire hose of badness out there. Stars and Stripes has this report. interestingly illustrated. Let me get to the original version of this so I can read it as intended. Fort Greely, Alaska, I believe. Fort Greely. Oh, what does this pop up in Stars and Stripes? Showing me about a hamburger deal. Terrific. Just like the president likes. Fort Greely struggles to feed soldiers. Maybe we should be sending them the hamburgers from this place. What is it? All right, I don't know. Struggles to feed soldiers due to the impact of cuts initiated by our friends at Dodgy. Gary Warner reporting this just yesterday for Stars and Stripes. Is it important to feed soldiers, fellas? I'm not really sure. How does an army travel? You would think it would be more important to shoe the soldiers, but as it turns out, we are instructed by military geniuses of the past that, feeding your soldiers an important thing. As I said, interestingly illustrated is with a picture of a ground-based missile interceptor being lowered into its silo in 2007. It's very cool and missile-y looking, and that holds a great deal of interest for folks who are in the services, I guess. A remote army base in Alaska that has a key role in intercepting incoming intercontinental ballistic missiles in the event of a nuclear war. Important. That's what they're trying to say. Is struggling to keep its dining facilities operating following an exodus of staff under the dodgy budget slashing campaign. Again, a budget slashing campaign done with zero regard for continuity of operations, which is not a thing that they even understood to be the case. They figured government, who cares, right? We can do without it. Slash everywhere. Slash wherever you can. We don't understand how things work. We don't care how things work. We'll be out of here before the consequences become obvious. In reality, it gets down to things like, can you feed the people serving in the armed forces? No? Who cares? I'm a billionaire. I'm leaving. Fort Greely, about 100 miles south of Fairbanks, Alaska, is facing a critical disruption in food service operations resulting from the government's loss of essential civilian positions due to the Deferred Resignation Program, or DRP, retirements, and the federal hiring freeze. The Army wrote in its justification review document filed to allow for a waiver to requirements for a competitive bid contract. So they'll solve it with corruption. Terrific. The solicitation and documents were posted on government websites. The lack of staff as a result of the quasi-official Department of Government Efficiency campaign had led to reduced dining facility hours, jeopardizing the readiness of soldiers, the document said. Well, there you have it. Fort Greely is home to the 49th Missile Defense Battalion, which operates the largest ground-based mid-course defense anti-ballistic missile systems.com.edu/Bitcoin, what have you. Lots of jargon today. Congress has authorized up to 40 interceptor missiles for Fort Greely. A fictionalized version of the base is featured in the nuclear doomsday film A House of Dynamite that recently made its debut on Netflix, and I think I watched it. I think it was pretty good. I think I enjoyed it. I think I recommend it to you, and I think a lot of things about this. Because nighttime winter temperatures at times drop below negative 20 degrees, Fort Greely is also the site of the Cold Regions Test Center. Did you know that? The CRTC, which measures the ability of military equipment to withstand extreme low temperatures. A good idea, I think. Without an operable dining facility, military and government workers will be denied accessibility to prepared meals on the installation, the command said. That will result in negatively impacting their physical and cognitive readiness and contribute to degraded performance during training and normal duty requirements. But don't tell Russia. Oh, except political union with Russia. So I guess it's okay now. Don't tell China, unless we're going to have political union with them too. The United States is switching sides, or out of NATO and into BRICS. So everything will be fine. And the starving soldiers is no problem. P.S. Elon Musk says, I'm sure, let them DoorDash. Why are we worried about it? Really? Negative 20 degrees, 100 miles south of Fairbanks. Who's DoorDashing? So snowmobile DoorDashing. Dog sled DoorDashing. Whatever. The addition of 2 cooks and 5 service workers carries a projected cost, by the way. How much does it cost to do that? $750,000 per year, according to the Army document. But Elon can't spare it. The Army is looking to speed the food services contract. The solicitation received a waiver from competitive bidding, meaning the first company that meets the Army's criteria can be awarded the contract. So, love that chicken from Popeyes. Just can't get it to you. But if you figured out a way to get it there, how about a civilian-marked 737 with an internal munitions bay that can drop sandwiches, but convince them that it's a civilian plane? We can find you some way of connecting to the previous articles. Competition is not possible for this requirement due to the short timeline to procure the services needed to prevent mission failure to the government, the statement said. I find myself in agreement, which is rare. The Army said it had explored alternative ways to feed the roughly 350 troops at Fort Greely, including transferring staff from Fort Wainwright, nearer anyway, to Fairbanks to Fort Greely. As a temporary fix, the Army considered using MREs, those things, meals ready to eat, the field rations used by the U.S. military. The Army said it didn't have enough MREs to support the switch, which, trouble in logistics land. I mean, MREs, that's funny too, right? This is the sort of thing that you might expect Elon Musk and maybe Pete Hagueseth to say. Let them DoorDash. And if not, they'll give them MREs. Doesn't the Army have those things? I mean, we have that for deployments all the time. They can't find enough MREs to feed 350 people. That's not a great situation. He's hollered at the Army. Our readiness is suffering. Say the hungry soldiers who still support Donald Trump somehow. I don't know whether they do or not. And not feeding the troops, I think, will get you in trouble. Not that they'll blame the president for it, but they probably should. All right, let's see. I think we've reached the end of what I have tucked away in Instapaper since yesterday, which is good, I guess. Let me add this. I don't know. A wave of late-breaking realizations by people who, I guess, have considered themselves centrists, slow-moving centrists and all this, but now joining us on common ground, except embracing things like impeachment, as the title of this piece from Jill Lawrence in the Bulwark says, embracing impeachment. I can't get through the article, but between that and, let's see, was it Michelle Goldberg, who doesn't really strike me as a foot dragger in all this, but nonetheless, interesting to see her opinion column in the New York Times being commented on all over Blue Sky today, including by Adam Serwer, who makes reasonable points that aren't necessarily arguing in Michelle's favor necessarily. But the idea of saying, I think her title was, the opinion piece, was the resistance libs were right. Which is another way of saying that the dirty effing hippies of yore were right, because they're the same people. Well, not the same people per se, but coming from the same place. But once again, the cautious folks coming around to saying the people that they made a career or made career boosting moves of saying had gone too far. And isn't it really better if we pulled a little back and don't alarm people and don't say anything about ICE or police or any of those things? And then we'll be viewed as reasonable and advance our careers, P.S., and then get people to listen to us, etc. No, it all turns out we were right from the beginning. Embracing impeachment was the first such example, I guess, this week, but it's a running thing. The case against Trump and his cabinet keeps growing, and the argument for waiting is no longer convincing, says Jill Lawrence. We may get around to this. This might be part of what Greg brings us. He loves reading examples from the Bulwark. But there you go. The time has come to get serious about impeachment. Donald Trump himself expects it if Democrats win the House in this year's midterms, and we've already had previews. Scores of House Democrats voted to advance impeachment articles against Trump last month. Articles have targeted at least 3 of his cabinet secretaries, and a bipartisan pair of lawmakers is drafting charges against a 4th. And basically, she comes around to saying, I'll skip ahead a paragraph or two, practical or not, achievable or not at this moment in time, which of Trump's illegal, unconstitutional criminal acts does not warrant impeachment? Who among his wrecking crew leadership does not deserve the same? It's not a presidency, Democratic strategist Simon Rosenberg has written. It's a crime spree. He said that less than a month ago, and the spree has escalated rapidly since then. Good points. I'm sure we'll come back to them tomorrow. As I mentioned, you can now find this all over Blue Sky as well. as people comment on Michelle Goldberg's entry, the resistance libs were right. I guess I got a second or two to give you a paragraph of that before we exit for the day. For the last decade, there's been a debate among people who don't like Donald Trump about whether he's a fascist. The argument that he isn't often hinges on two things. First, when Trump first came to power, he lacked a street-fighting force like Benito Mussolini's black shirts, even if he was able to muster a violent rabble on January 6th. Trump didn't proceed to unleash an army of paramilitary supporters in an American Kristallnacht or take dramatic action to remake the American state in his image, wrote the leftists Daniel Bessner and Ben Burgess in Did It Happen Here?, a 2024 anthology examining the fascism question. And second, Trump didn't pursue campaigns of imperial expansion, which some scholars view as intrinsic to fascism. For all of Trump's hostility toward countries he perceives as enemies of the U.S., notably Iran, there is no indication that he sought a war with any foreign power, still less that he had been consumed by a desire for foreign conquest and the creation of an American empire, wrote Richard J. Evans in his 2021 essay, Why Trump Isn't a Fascist. And it's striking how much of those arguments that Trump is not a fascist have suffered in just the first few days of this year, in which we've been plunged to new depths of national madness. Okay, so you get the sense of what's going on there. I'll stop it at this point because time tells us to give it up and hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's he got on tap? Minnesotan faith leaders, military veterans, civic leaders, and common citizens describe the paramilitary MAGA Klan invasion of the state. Klan with a K, of course. Rest of the menu? The FBI is investigating Renee Good's ties to a local nonviolent anti-ICE religious group, or maybe several of those groups. Oh no, can't have that.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
He's got word about the Civil Rights Division folks resigning at the Department of Justice. And, gosh, what else? Hey, internationally, let's see. A former Navy sailor sentenced to 16 years for selling technical and operating systems information about ships to Chinese intelligence. But I guess it's okay because political union with China, too. See you tomorrow.